ownership in some ways, when you look at today's work culture, is like that missing ingredient of a good biryani. I can see leaders wanting it in their team members, and I can almost see team members wanting to provide it but just not having the space for it. And you can see that in the data. Nearly about a Gallup survey showed about 23% of employees actually don't feel engaged at work. That's nearly 8 out of 10 people don't feel like they have ownership over their projects, over their work. And when people don't have ownership, they can't bring their full selves to work.
Very true.
Take pay, go home, thank you so much. And for leaders, there's this struggle. For employees, we have been trained from school and college, follow instructions, do your work, go home. And a lot of corporate hierarchy doesn't encourage it either. It's a tough place to be. So where do you see really the gap when it comes to ownership?
Yeah, I think there's some very obvious answers, right? Simon Sinek has been screaming for quite a few years now, start with why. Because people need to today understand why behind the how and the what.
Yeah.
And it's not just about being told what to do, but being part of something is extremely important. So that ownership doesn't come out of authority. It comes out of being part of something. It comes out of something authentic that they can relate to. Brene Brown talks about how trust and clarity bring ownership.
Interesting.
And you can't build trust through Trello boards. Right? So if you want that magic sauce, you have to think outside the box and say, okay, how do I create that ownership? Adam Grant has done quite a bit of work around that space where he talks about how agency and autonomy are the new tools of motivation. The importance of creating that or giving that agency and autonomy to people. One concept that I've been quite fascinated about for quite a few years now and has played a big role in the kind of space we've been able to create at different levels is what IKEA has built, what's come to known as IKEA Effect.
Yeah.
And it's a well-researched psychological insight. IKEA as a company, they have built on this principle called the labor of love.
Yeah.
The principle is that when, they don't give you a completely assembled furniture, it's half assembled and you do it yourself. When you take two very similar tables, one you buy assembled and one you buy from IKEA that you assembled yourself, they say that you tend to put more value on the one you assembled.
And though it may be a little ricketier than the one you bought.
Absolutely, yeah. And they really played on that. They built a whole empire on that principle of labor of love. And that's really the power of co-creation. When somebody's part of the process of building it, they tend to value it more, they tend to own it more, they tend to cherish it more.
Absolutely. If you think of it, co-creation, though it has so many positives, is also a more challenging process.
Yeah.
It is so much easier for both of us to just go buy the blessed table and put it in the house. Neither of us want to sit and build it or do it, right? Today you can get Urban Clap to do it also. But co-creation, I think at a work level, it doesn't just fail because there's a lack of process, but I think it fails a lot of times today and stuff today because there's no space for it.
Yeah.
There is space for a one-on-one where, say, I'm checking in with you, you say, okay, this is what you're doing, get to work. But there's no space for it. It tends to slow work down because now we're listening to ideas. It is definitely more effort and takes a lot more intentionality. So I think as an idea, it's good, but I think we've also got to build spaces which facilitate co-creation.
Very true. I think it's definitely more investment. Just talking a little bit more on the whole IKEA thing, right? Like when you think about what IKEA is doing, they're not giving you raw wood and saying, build your table. If they had done that, it would be a complete disaster.
Yeah.
Then they would just be...
It's the right amount of difficulty, right?
Yeah, they would just have customer complaints. What they give you is a very deeply researched, put together, processed item to assemble.
Yeah.
They have experimented with, okay, this is the amount of difficulty they can handle, this they can't handle. And that's very clearly measured with a lot of research.
Nice.
When you open the box, there are a few things. It comes with a simple to do manual. It has very clear, crystal clear instructions. It has images so that you can visualize how to. It comes with the right amount of nuts and bolts and with those annoyingly little Allen keys.
Yeah.
The other thing that they do really well, if you visit an IKEA showroom, you come across those experience zones.
You get to see, touch, feel. Yeah.
You get to see what you're going to build. They're able to sort of vision cast in some way, saying, see, this is what you could build, this is what you could own. So they have put a lot of those ingredients together,
Yeah.
and that is what the companies will have to do very structurally and very intentionally if they want to harness the power of ownership, and that requires investment.
Definitely, right? And I think the three things from what we've seen, we've experienced, we've experimented, failed with, that really help with this. One is what you're saying, right? You need bounded autonomy. It's not just, hey, here is some wood, go build whatever you want. There are clear guardrails to this process, defining what success looks like, having that end goal in mind, and any non-negotiable constraint. This is what we can do in this process, this is what we can't do. Because sometimes otherwise co-creation becomes this sort of just magic dust you want to sprinkle on everything, and then it completely bombs
Absolutely.
for some piece. So that balance between structure and freedom is essential for ownership to flourish, for co-creation really to flourish, right? The second thing we've tried to do is really build co-creation into existing processes. And I think this is taken a bit from Atomic Habits, but your habit stacking, we're process stacking in some sense. We have an existing process, can I add co-creation to it where it works and where it brings in more buy-in? Because then people want to be part of that project, people want to be part of that end goal because they're invested in the process. I think the challenge is not to get into endless consensus building, but somehow rather meaningful participation in really shaping the outcomes that people want to do. The last thing we found is reward teams when they actually demonstrate, display, show ownership and co-creation behaviors, right? Because sometimes you only sort of reward the outcome, but we don't reward the process. And I think for these spaces, it's good to do that. Because when you do that, when you really reward the person who raised difficult questions, who sharpened the product because of the process, you're creating a space where more people want to do that. The last thing you want to do is really recognize and celebrate when people do this, because what gets rewarded gets repeated. And that's a great mantra to have when you're thinking of co-creation. When we've seen ownership works, it becomes magical. It almost is like this machine where the wheels are turning so smoothly, where everyone is saying, hey, let me give you my best. They move from a consumer mindset within the organization to a creator mindset.
Yeah.
And that is when people bring their full selves to work, it is inspiring, right? They solve problems, they create solutions, they innovate, and they're no more just waiting for instructions. And that's a great life to be a part of. That's a great workplace to be a part of.
Yeah.
Because when they stop waiting for permission, they then have that freedom to be brilliant.